I have just started recording the meeting. So we'll have a recording of it on my computer here, and it also should be being recorded on YouTube. So people can come in and rewatch it if you want. And it's a very informal meeting. Eleanor, you want to kick us off, or Zara, either one?
I'm gonna pass it to Ziron Pleasure.
All right. So first, just want to thank everybody for joining. You received the email, and we think that Councilman Clay was gracious enough to come on and share this information with us. And I see Councilman Taylor down at the bottom.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir, for joining us.
How you doing?
We're being graced with 2 council members today, guys. We must be doing something right.
That's right. That's right.
Hey,
So,
Derek, we got to be careful. We don't have a quorum.
Yes, sir.
So, as we mentioned throughout the week, with the whole Know Your Neighbor Award, we are gathering for a special informational meeting to discuss the aviation noise policy surrounding Ward 4 and other areas. So again, like I said, Councilman Clay is going to be providing some insight on some of the things that he's aware of that we may or may not be aware of. And what I want to ask you guys, for those, you have the email address, concernedcitizens@college-park@gmail. If you have a question, you can send that question, or you can send the question down in the chat. But basically, we're just going to be kind of listening and taking notes. And Councilman Clay said he's going to record everything so we can go back to YouTube and watch it as well. But thank you again for being here, and thank you, Councilman Clay, and I pass it over to you.
Okay, well, this is probably the most informal Zoom meeting that I've been having. So we'll just try to run it as much as we can. If you do not turn on the Zoom meeting and watch it at the same time, because if you have your mic on, you'll get feedback and it'll drive everybody crazy. So in fact, if you keep your mic off, unless you're asking a question, except for the like Zarin and Eleanor and those of us who are talking back and forth on some of this, but that facilitates things also. What you ought to know is, let me start off by saying one of the reasons why that we are so excited about airport noise over the last several weeks is because the FAA did something that they haven't done in, I don't know, a couple decades.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to do a study on aircraft noise and how people were annoyed by it. And they called it the Neighborhood Environmental Survey. Now, the reason they called it the Neighborhood Environmental Survey is because they really wanted to ask about aircraft noise, but they didn't want people that got polled in the survey to know that. So they didn't want to set people up to think that, well, this is what we're interested in, is airport noise per se. I sit on an FAA committee that oversees research on airport noise, emissions from aircraft, and climate change. And so we've been pursuing this for years. I've been on there since, probably when it was something called something else. It was called Partner at one time. Now it's called Ascent. But I've been on there probably since about 2009, 2010 timeframe. And we've been looking at airport noise for all that time. What we've been hearing is that people are more concerned about noise, and they seem to be concerned even when the old noise curve that they use, called the Schultz curve, that shows, well, how much noise should it take to make you annoyed? And that was based on a number of surveys and studies done 20, 30 years ago over a period of time. So they finally decided, we decided, those of us who are on the advisory board working with the FAA decided, yep, let's do this. And it has taken us literally, I think, since we started talking about it, about 5 years, which is crazy. The study was actually done back in, I think it's now 2015, 2016 timeframe, if I remember rightly. But it has taken all this time to get the data released out to the public. Well, one of the reasons I think it took so long is because nobody was happy with the result. What it said is for virtually every level of noise, from a quiet, well, your conversation is, let's say that's the normal level of noise, about 60 to 65 dB. If you don't know what a dB is, don't worry about it, but that's sort of a normal conversational level. From half of that noise level, what you would hear is half the noise level of a conversation, all the way up to several times the noise of a conversation. Everybody is annoyed more by noise. So FAA, I think, hung on to the results for a while, trying to figure it out. And finally, they just released it this year. Now, I've been bugging in my participation in the committee. I represent the organization called Noise, which College Park belongs to. As part of that, I kept bugging people. When are we going to see the results? When are we going to see the results? So we finally got the results. They came out in January, about the 13th of January, I think. When those results came out, they started a public comment period. And this, if you don't hear much else out of this meeting tonight, hear this. You have an opportunity to go on to an FAA website and put in whatever comment you want to make about noise. Now, they've given you some guidance as to what they'd like to hear about. They'd like to hear, for example, about research on noise. They'd like to hear ideas of what it is about noise that bother you, et cetera, et cetera. But all that information is on my website. So the other thing you should hear is clayoncouncil.com. ClayonCouncil.com. That's my website. If you go to that website, there's a separate page. Look at the top. It lists the different pages on the site. Go to aircraft noise. And I'm going to show you that a little later. But that's where you'll go. And if you click on the first thing you see up there, it'll take you to the FAA website. And when you go to the website, you can see a summary of the survey, and you can see a link on the side as to how to comment. And when you go to comment, it'll just pop up on your screen, just like if you ordered something off Amazon.com. It'll pop up on your screen and you fill in your information, and then you put in your comments. And all these comments are going to be published out on the web, out on the FAA web. I think they may even go into the Federal Register, which is an official government publication that any citizen can see. So if you comment, not only can I see it, but the FAA can see it, and any citizen that goes in fact, there are comments out there already that you can go online and see what other people have said about aircraft noise. Now, I have been arguing for a number of years that the way we measure noise, the way the FAA measures noise and decides things like whether you get noise insulation or not, that way is no longer valid. That it may have been okay at one point in time, but it's not okay anymore for the reasons a lot of you know. A lot more planes, a lot more traffic, some of it flying lower, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to talk about those things. But I wanted to start off by saying this is why we're so excited right now, because for the first time, the FAA is looking at a new noise curve, and we want to make sure that that curve appears higher considerably than it used to be. In other words, a lot more people are annoyed at all levels of noise. But the FAA could say, well, people are just more sensitive to noise now. Or, you know, they've read about it in the newspaper, and it's just that they're more aware of it. I don't think that's the case. I expect you don't think that's the case. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get this measure changed. So one of the major drivers, I've been working on noise measurements for years, literally. And I've been out to your ward and I've made measurements at your ward. I've worked with the consultant that we brought in at my request when we built the arena. I worked with them to make sure that we were communicating between council and the council had a realistic idea of what kind of noise levels we were going to have in the arena from planes flying over, because we wanted to have some events in there that were relatively quiet. And well, I think we did a pretty good job of that. I was very pleased. You realize that we probably spent between $4 and $5 million extra on the arena just to make sure that it was quieter inside so that we could have things other than loud basketball games and rock concerts. So having said that, I've got a presentation that I gave at Representative Schofield's town hall. She had a town hall last week on Monday. Was it Monday?
No, Wednesday.
Wednesday. It was Wednesday. Yeah, the FAA had a tutorial on
Right.
Monday
Webinar.
about the national survey. That is on YouTube as well on the FAA channel. And if you go to that FAA page that I told you about at the beginning, you'll see a link to the YouTube channel so you can listen to what the FAA said about the noise study. And I might add that the guy from the FAA who is speaking there, and he does a very good job, is the same guy that chairs our advisory committee, or he doesn't chair it, but he's the FAA authority over our advisory committee where we comment on noise. So I know all these people. And that's good, because I can send them comments. They may not listen to my comments, but at least they know who they're coming from. So what I'd like to do tonight is go through just a few slides in the presentation that I gave last Wednesday at the Schofield meeting, and then kind of stop between these several slides and let you ask questions or make comments or what have you. Does that work? Is that
Yes.
okay? How does that sound, Eleanor and Zara?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, let me do that. Let me see if I can bring this presentation up, and I'll share my screen. This is entitled Aircraft Noise in District 60 for Representative Schofield. I'm not going to go through the agenda because I'm not going to just go through every item on that agenda. But let me just move on to the second slide. And I just wanted to talk about, I don't know how well everybody is. I know at least people in my ward, I have had calls and emails saying, I hear planes coming from all directions, don't know what's going on. I don't see any planes, for example. Well, that's because the planes aren't flying over your head, but you're getting noise from them taking off. So let me go through the different kinds of noise on here and see if you recognize them. The first one is what I call overflight noise from takeoffs. So from the wind is from the west. By the way, aircraft have to take off into the wind and land into the wind. So if the wind is from the west, every plane that takes off from Hartsfield-Jackson flies over our houses in College Park. Most of them fly over Ward 4, some over Ward 2, some over Ward 1. They just clip the bottom of Ward 1. Of the Lynx, for example, they don't fly over it, but the sound level reaches them from planes flying over there. So when you hear a plane flying over that's taking off, you'll hear kind of a passing roar. It's sort of like hearing a train coming in the distance, and then it goes by and it passes off into the distance again. But you hear it coming for a while, and you'll hear it going away for a while. Then you have the opposite that happens when the wind is from the east. When the wind is from the east, we don't have planes flying over that are taking off. We have them landing. And when they land, they fly at a much lower altitude, but the engines are cut way back. So all you don't hear much engine noise at all. And the only way I describe it is kind of a passing whoosh. And as it passes over, you'll hear the whine of the engines, but the planes are on a 3-degree glide slope. And that means that they are basically coasting in. So when they're coasting in like that at a low level, if you go, for example, if you go on College Street, not far from there's a little dog kennel place that you can leave your dogs there, not far from Sun Trust. When the planes come in, you won't hear them until maybe they're a block or two away. You can see them coming, but you don't hear them. And then when they pass over, you hear this sudden whoosh, and then it dies off very quickly. Another one that you guys should hear, God knows that we hear it here at my house, and we're on Lyle, which is about 1.5 miles from the northernmost runway, the end of the northernmost runway. On a Monday morning when the planes are taking off, or let me say when they're landing, not taking off, when the planes are landing on a Monday morning to the east and taking off to the east, what happens is when the plane touches down, they have to slow down quickly. If they just use the brakes, they'd burn the brakes out very, very soon. So what they do, they reverse the thrust on the jet engines and shoot the engine thrust forward. And that blows forward and slows the plane down very quickly. That lasts about 15 seconds. And that's a loud roar because they have the engine cranked up. They really want to slow that plane down quickly. Then I'm going to jump to the bullet right above the bullet on the bottom. The ground noise from takeoffs is a loud roar because they're at our end of the runway, sitting there lined up to take off. When they get the go ahead from the tower, they rev up the engines loud. Sometimes they rev it up further to test the engine, make sure that everything's working right. They release the brakes and they go roaring down the runway. Now, that means you're going to hear a loud roar at the beginning, may stay stationary, same level for a few seconds, and then they roar down the runway. And so you hear this roaring sound and it fades away as the plane gets further and further away down the runway. Now, the noise we probably don't hear typically is planes are just on the ground taxiing. It adds to the noise, but it's not anywhere near as loud as the other usually. And you'll hear the whine of the engines. And as the planes stop and start, as they're waiting on the taxiway, you'll hear that a bit. But you don't hear anything like the levels from when they're taking off. So it's when the planes are landing and taking off to the east that we get this ground noise, I call it. And if the wind is just right, on our back patio here, we can hear the noise. Oh gosh, it's conversation level. So it's what we would call 60 to 65 dB. And sometimes if a big plane takes off on one of the northern runways, we'll hear a loud roar that may raise the level of sound twice as loud, maybe even 2.5, 3 times as loud, or 10 to 20 dB if you want to hear it in dB terms. So with that quick introduction on the type of sound, does anybody want to ask a question, or do they want to talk about, yeah, have you, or say, yeah, I've heard that sound? Okay.
I absolutely have heard that sound. I think everybody in Ward 4 have heard all the sounds that you described. Matter of fact, I hear sounds in somebody's microphone as you're giving the presentation.
That's right. They're flying over Ward 4. Jamestown.
Well, I can just, by the way, I think many of you know I have tracking equipment. I can, if you see the background behind me, that is all flight paths flying in. This was several months ago when we had weather. So that's a weather map back there. And also there is, there you can see the flight tracks of the planes. So I have several different pieces of equipment here. That is equipment that receives and broadcasts it out to someone that I'm working with out on the internet, a company that I work with out on the internet. I give them information that I receive on an antenna that's at the back of my house from the plane. I'll explain that in a minute. But I broadcast it out to their server on the internet, and then they allow me free to come back on that server and display the flight paths. The nice thing about this display, I don't normally use it for measurements, but the nice thing about this display, I can see all the traffic coming into the airport at one time, whether they're departing, whether they're approach, whether they're on final, whatever they're on, I can see them. I also have a couple other pieces of equipment that one that you use actually in a private aircraft that receives signals directly from the plane, and I can measure exactly how high the plane is. I can tell how far away they are from me, what direction they're going, etc. And actually, I have another antenna that provides data out to the web on another source. So I pretty much know where the planes are going, at least particularly on this side of the airport when they're in range of my equipment. And the other thing I can do, I monitor the control tower. So when they line up at the end of the runway and get clearance to take off, I can hear that. I can time how long it takes between the time they're given that clearance and the time they actually take off. I can tell you how high they are at various points along the way. So I'm pretty much able, and I was over the other day overlooking the site of the new subdivision over there off Herschel Road, and I was making some measurements on takeoff because I wanted to see that the noise levels were not so high that what we had planned. We did an agreement for those homes over there. I don't know whether you know this or not, but we struck an agreement that they would maintain no lower than 35 decibels of sound reduction from the outside to the inside of those homes. And on the average, they should be about 38 dB. And just to give you an idea, we have an old house. Our house was built in 1939 with a 56 edition. And it doesn't have insulation in most of the walls. And we have, but it has been, like yours, it has been part of the FAA insulation program. So it had air conditioning, it had storm windows, and just like yours, the ceiling around the storm windows has gotten old. And the windows do rattle when we get this noise from the airport, that ground noise that I told you about. Our windows will rattle. And a house like that reduces the sound level about 20 decibels, which says that it's about 1/4 as loud as it would be outside. If you have a well sealed up house, and it might be a little better than 20, because there was some noise insulation done on it, just not the kind that they're doing these days. If you have a well insulated house with good storm windows, double pane windows, so you got a storm window and one layer of window that is actually 2 layers, a double pane, you'll get 30 dB sound reduction on a house like that. If you don't, obviously you can't leave the windows open. You have to have air conditioning. So, I'm asking, I got it, council to agree that we're asking for 5 to 8 more decibels of reduction in the new homes that are going in up there. And I was measuring under the flight path for takeoffs anyhow. I wanted to get up there and do a landing as well, but I haven't had a chance to do that. I had a problem with one of my apps. So that's what we've done, at least to help with the noise situation going forward. So now let me stop for a second. Does anybody have anything to comment on that?
I have a concern, Councilman Clay, April Wyatt, with
Yes.
the installation that you have studied and requesting for the new houses. How does that apply to those of us that have been here for years, not only with the installation, but we're having the structures of our homes cracked and diminishing to a degree?
Okay, that's good. Both good questions. First off, that's new construction.
Right.
That is the deal that we made with the developer before we would sell them the land. We said, the council said that you must do this or we don't have a deal. So now let's try to fit that to your case. We're not selling land to a developer.
Right.
What we might do, and part of this session tonight is sort of a brainstorming session too, because I need to dialogue with you guys. I've wanted to do that for several years, but that just hasn't happened.
Here we are.
Yeah. Well, I've offered to piggyback on a ward meeting, but anyhow.
Neither here nor there. We'll go on.
I'm not there. I'm here. So what we might do is, if we were to say to a contractors that when you get a license, a permit to do renovation on a house, that you have to, just like with wiring. Let me give you an example with electrical wiring. I've got an old house.
Right.
We still have some old wiring in here. We've got some that was done in the 50s. We've got some that's done later. If I had had a large portion of my wiring redone in the house, I would have been required to fix all the wiring in the house. Now, we didn't do that. We didn't have to do that. The old wiring is still good. It's in good cables and so forth. So I'm not worried about it damaging the house. But one thing we could do, and I hadn't thought of this until literally just when you asked the question, what we could do is make a requirement on people that are renovating homes. Let's start with renovating homes. That doesn't help you yet. But if you're coming in and renovating a home, you have got to put in a certain noise level of insulation if you're in Ward 4. or some parts of Ward 2 would apply as
Mhm.
well. If Derek is still on, I can't see that at this point. So that's
Right.
that's a possibility. Um,
Mhm.
the the FAA, and now this is where your comments come in. The argument that I have been making whenever I could, both in the assent meetings that I attend. I am also on another FAA committee called the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, which is a fluke. It doesn't make a lot of sense why I'd be on that committee, but I am, and so I can comment. And what I've been campaigning for is the fact that those of us who were done in the 80s, our insulation was done in the 80s, it needs to be upgraded.
Yes.
The seals around
Absolutely.
the storm doors are
Mhm.
worn. As you know, my windows
Yes.
rattle. Your windows probably
Mhm.
rattle. Well, I have single pane windows. I've got a storm window and a single pane window
Mhm.
where the current noise standards are to have a double pane window. So you got 3 levels of glass. If you go to Odyssey Counseling Center, for example, on College Street, you'll find that they have 3 levels of glass. They have a double pane window separated by a couple inches, and then there's a storm window. I did the
Mhm.
same thing for College Park Elementary. When I found out that College Park Elementary was not going to be built with any different architectural standards than they use on the north side,
Mhm.
I got together with some of my colleagues in noise monitoring and what have you, some people that I knew that did professional noise installation who were audio acoustic people, and I passed them the study that the school board had gotten. They looked at the study and they said no. I looked at the study, and I'm not a certified acoustical person, although I've taught myself that area.
Mhm.
And they came
Right.
back and said no. In fact, they didn't even know which way the planes were flying when they made the noise measurements.
Oh,
So I
shucks.
shot that back to the board, and probably wasn't very popular at that time with the school board, but they were good. They agreed to they spent over $100,000 on that school, which finished up about 6 months after they opened,
Mhm.
to add additional insulation. And when I walked in with that building with Oscar Hudson to do the inspection, and when you walked into those classrooms, there was a sense of quietness that you didn't
Mhm.
get out in the hall with the air conditioning
Right.
running. So where I'm going with this is that the FAA, there's new technology, there's new standards in noise insulation that we could benefit on, that the people up on the new homes are going to benefit from. There's no way they're going to get 35 dB without double pane windows and a storm window. I can tell you that much. So if we made a change in our regulations, that if you're going to renovate a house in Ward 4, that you've got to upgrade to the same insulation standards that's going to happen at a new house.
Mhm.
Now that will help a few people, right? But
Right. Just a few.
most of you guys are not going to renovate your house completely to the point where we could enforce that. That's something I think I'm going to bring up with council now.
Yes.
If Derek, Councilman Taylor, if you're on there,
I'm here.
don't don't let me forget, okay?
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Good
So that's
evening. Good evening. This is Theodosia Newton, and I live in Ward 4. And I'm hearing what you are saying that you might want to ask to require, but are you saying require the contractors to make sure that the standards of the windows comply to what you're saying? I'm sure they would be happy to comply, but at the homeowner's expense. So if
That's-
I decide to change my door, it depends on what renovations you're talking about. So you have to be specific. So if I decided I want to change my front door, or change my back door, or are you saying that you're gonna, in order for that to pass an inspection or whatever inspection, that's gonna be required for me to make some up changes or some renovations in my house, are you saying that you want to make that a requirement, that we have to change the windows? I'm trying to understand, what are you
Yeah,
saying that
no,
you want
no.
to require?
This is why it's such a great meeting. You're asking exactly the right question.
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, remember I said if they were renovating a house, I don't know how things are in Ward 4, but around here, what I've seen is we walk every day and we see people that have bought up homes, and they come in and they do a complete renovation of the home. They take out the walls. They make big rooms, which I frankly, over time, I don't think are going to work very well, but that's what they do. They give it this new look. Well, that ain't your problem. That's their problem. In other words, if they want to come in and buy up a house at a good price, because you know what they're going to do with it, right? They're going to sell it for a high price.
Mhm.
And that's when you hit them with this and say, well, when you sell it for your high price, you're going to give them a lot more value because you're going to put in the insulation that house should have. Okay. So that works for somebody that buys your home and then goes ahead and renovates it and thinks they're going to make a killing because they can sell it for a lot higher price. Because we know the prices of homes around here are going up.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Okay. But to your point, if you want to renovate your home, then you're going to have to pay more for it, right? And therein lies the problem. Because if we force them to do that, then you're going to end up having to pay a higher price for the renovation. So it works real well if you're changing the house ownership. But if you're keeping it yourself, then that's potentially a lot of extra money.
Yeah, so that's why I think that we're gonna have to come up with something else. So that I don't want you to
Well,
make a recommendation, because I might just decide to open up my living room. And
Oh.
what you call them, the saying, because I'm here and I've been here, and then so I retired, so I might want to be able to do that. So I don't think that it will be fair that I will have to upgrade my windows and all that. So it just depends on how you're going to make those recommendations, what type of renovation, or are you talking about new homeowners, or are you talking about people who, exist in the homeowners, because a lot of changes that people are putting in actually are hurting a lot of the retired, middle class income. So when we make these changes, we have to make sure that we can consider everybody. So I don't like just making recommendations, and we haven't really looked at every scenario.
Well, what I'm going to suggest, and I've got to think this thing through.
Yes.
And Derek and I may end up getting our heads together and talking about it a little bit. We can do that because we're not a quorum. But
Yeah.
but what we can do is first off, when you reply, this is one reason why I really, really want you guys to go on the FAA website and comment. When you put your comments in, bring up the point that those of you who are living in older homes are dealing with noise insulation that has deteriorated
That's
and
right.
that is not up to the same standards that currently are being provided for noise insulation. And you could also point out that maybe you want a higher decibel level of noise transference. I don't expect you to remember all the terminology, but just the transfer of the noise from the outside to the inside, you want it more attenuated. You want it to be reduced more. You want to be insulated more, a higher quality of insulation. And well, we've got some more slides in here that may help you with that. And of course, all this material is on my website, so you can refer to that and it'll help you with your comments. When you make your comments, bring that up, that you would like, you have insulation is deteriorated, you have more noise from aircraft, and we're going to give you some information on that, and that the technology has improved. Noise insulation today is considerably better than it used to be. I can't do anything. Nobody can do anything about the noise outside, but the noise inside, we ought to be able to make a big difference on.
Mhm.
So, all right. Now, Coco, you had a question, didn't you?
Yes, sir. And thank you for being with us tonight, you and Councilman Taylor. Are there currently any grants available for window and door renovation for us?
I'm glad you asked that, because that was what I was going to suggest, that we might be able to look into. And that might be something that we get our lobbyists. Gene, would you make a note of that for me?
Yeah.
That we might get our lobbyists to see if there are any grants. I'm not talking about an FAA noise improvement program. That's what the airport runs, and that's what we would normally get. But
Mhm.
there may be some other grants that we might be able to latch on to for individuals who want to improve their home and are under the noise path. So
That's right.
that's a possibility.
Fantastic.
Another thing that I'm going to continue pushing for is re-insulation wherever the noise has gotten worse. And that's why we need to change the noise metric, the noise measure. Right now, it just takes an average of the noise over 24 hours. In fact, I have a slide on that. Maybe I should wait and not jump into that. But anyhow, just say it takes an average of noise. Well, you guys are getting hit with one plane after another every 45 seconds or a minute, or maybe a half hour. At least I'm going back pre-COVID, during a rush hour. I've seen rush hours go on for 30 minutes, surely 20 minutes, and we have several of a day. We have rush hours for landing and rush hours for taking off. And depending on which way the wind is blowing, you may be getting a landing rush hour or a takeoff rush hour. So that's something that that we need a new metric for, in order to convince them that something has changed and the old metric just doesn't work, and now we need to reconsider. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. Those of you who have had a lot of noise and you're almost under the flight path, with a new metric, I don't think it's going to change that. You already needed insulation, and you continue to need insulation. So there we got to make the argument that the insulation has deteriorated, and that better insulation is available. Even if it hadn't deteriorated, there's better information, and that it ought to be included under the airport improvement program, which is it's money paid out of the airport to improve the sound levels. Now, something I did the other night at this Schofield meeting, we had a representative of the airport there, guy by the name of Tom Nasalki. And I've known Tom since since when I got on council, and we had our first big meeting with the airport on noise. And one of the things I pointed out to Tom was that we have put tight standards on this new development off of Herschel Road. And there are some other areas that we're looking at for possible development that will be in noisy areas. And the FAA could say, well, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? One day you ask us for money to insulate your homes that unfortunately were stuck in the noise from the airport, but yet you say, well, but you want to build more homes under the flight path. Well, yeah, because we're house prices are going up. We're trying to get more housing that's affordable. We're trying to find land to put that housing on, and that may mean now building where we would not have been inclined to build before, and where land had been cleared before. So in that particular case, what we would say is that we have a higher standard of insulation. Now, again, it doesn't help you outside, but it does help you inside. So Tom has already heard, Dr. Nasalki, I should say, has already heard me say in this other meeting with Representative Schofield that we are building homes, but we're making sure when they're built that they are well noise insulated. Now, I can tell you the FAA current policy is that they will not insulate new homes going up. That is not under the airport improvement program. If a home has been built, I think, if I don't hang me on the date, but I think it's since 1995, any homes built after that or thereabouts, they will not insulate, because you should have known better. That's basically their position on it. And I don't disagree with that. It makes sense. So what have we said? Make your comments. If you believe what I said, I'm not telling you what to say, but if you believe what I said, make your comments to the FAA so that they know where you're coming from, and make the comment that you need new insulation, you need up-to-date insulation, and separately, maybe the city can also explore, in addition to what I said previously about putting it on a builder who's doing renovating, we could also maybe pursue some grants for people who have been exposed to noise for a long time. So we got two good ideas that came out of this meeting that I hadn't really thought of before.
Councilman, excuse me.
Yeah,
Councilman Clay, is it possible for you to pull up that survey so the residents can see the survey that you're asking us to do?
I can, first off, it's not a survey. The survey's already been done. It's comments on the results of the survey. Okay.
All right.
So what I'm going to do is I will bring up my browser. All right, so that's my home page. It being that I'm councilman for Ward 1, it's targeted to Ward 1, but frankly, most of the information in it probably applies to everybody. So if we go to aircraft noise plate, see, I'm highlighting this in the upper right-hand corner. You go there and you see at the top of the page, I put a purple note on top of all these things. It says when the survey's over, or the comment period, excuse me, and you got me doing it now. The comment period is over 3:15. And click on this link to go to FAA page where you can comment. So I'm clicking on the link. There is the FAA page. Neighborhood Environmental Survey. Now, there's a survey. If you go over here on the left-hand side, everybody see that where it says aviation noise?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So They give you a little tutorial on noise. They talk about community response to noise. They talk about the history of noise. They talk about the neighborhood environmental survey and frequently asked questions on that survey. Now, one of the things that they'll see here, so here's the actual neighborhood environmental survey. And maybe I should just quickly, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm going to quickly show you. So here, there's an introduction. It shows the old curve that they had been using. And even people in the 65 dB weren't, only 10% people in the 65 dB. You guys are in the 65 dB. Are only 10% of you annoyed by noise? I don't think so.
No,
Okay,
couldn't be
that's the old
correct.
curve. Now this goes through the methodology. And here's a really good slide that I like to use to explain. Well, there's another. Let me hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's 1 jet a day at a very noisy level. Okay, over 100 dB is equal to 65 dB. So guys, let me ask you this. If you had only one really loud aircraft flying over once a day, and that's all you had, and it generated so much noise that the average spread over 24 hours was 65 dB or conversation level, would you care about that as compared to 10 aircraft having that level at the sound level, let's say, of a leaf blower next to you, or 100 at another lower level than that? You see the difference that I'm making by the FAA metric? All of those are 65 dB. So you could have one very loud airplane, 10 fairly loud airplanes, or 100 that are 60 that are much lower level, and they all generate the same number. And that's what's wrong with the metrics. We don't respond to averages. Ought to seem kind of obvious, but so they talk about how they did the study. You don't care about that, how they selected the airports. It turned out Atlanta was one of the airports they selected, and some of you probably got surveyed. Maybe you didn't answer the survey.
No.
But they talk about the number of responses and what area, because they knew where the responses were coming from. So they knew, according to what they talk about their contours, they knew what level the contours were. And they talked about, how they actually conducted the survey. They first did a mail survey, then they did a phone survey, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to go through that. Here's the new curve that they generated. You see the old curve on the left here. Now you see the right curve, the new, what they call the national curve, for want of a better way. And by the way, this was a really good study. Statistically, from what I can see, they did a really good job on it. And we oversaw it to some degree, but we weren't intimately involved in actually running the survey on the Ascent Committee. So look at what we see. If at 50 dB, virtually nobody was annoyed. You know, you're down there around 10%. But now look at 50 dB, 20% of the people. Now just to give you an example, when I was over measuring the noise levels a few weeks ago for that new development, the noise level in the neighborhood over there was 45 dB. 45 dB. This is therefore even 5 dB louder. If you look over here, 20% at 50 dB, 20% of the people are annoyed. Now, what you're seeing there is it ain't you guys. These are people that are out maybe 8 or 10 miles from the airport. They've never had planes flying over their head. And all of a sudden they got planes and they're finding it disturbing.
Yeah.
And what I say jokingly to some people is, you haven't heard noise till you come to College Park.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So, but look, this whole curve, the shape is different. The one on the left kind of stays low, and then it's kind of like what they call an exponential curve. The slope increases as you go further out. This one is more of an S-shaped curve, not a very sharp S, but it's a S-shaped curve. So it's a whole different ball game. So when you get down to this point, that was a summary of the survey, but you can read the whole survey if you want, the whole report from the survey. It's 460 pages.
Oh, wow. Right.
Now, the interesting thing is the appendices at the back of the report, they have separate curves for the separate pieces of information for the 20 airports that they did the survey for, people around those airports. Atlanta was one of those airports. So you can actually go and see what the specific characteristics for the Atlanta airport were, not just the overall national results. And that's kind of interesting. All right, so let me go back up here to the top. Now you see this arrow right here. See this thing that says view the webinar recording? So what I'm suggesting is look through this summary that I just went through with you. Then look at the webinar recording. That meeting lasted, I want to say at least an hour, probably, maybe a little more than an hour. So you can view the webinar recording there. Then you can go and comment at the very bottom. We went back to the bottom of this summary that I was showing you. See where it says click here?
Yes.
If you click there, and there you are. There's the Federal Register. And it goes through a lot of formality here. It talks about the contents of the report and et cetera, et cetera. You don't care about that at this point. But you see this green box right here?
Mm-hmm.
Submit a formal comment. So if you click on that green box, there you go.
Okay. That's what we need to know.
We do.
You got a place to put your comment in, and you've got your name, first name, last name, mailing address, zip code, all that good stuff.
Mm.
And you fill that in. And then once it's filled in, you see this grayed out box at the bottom. That's how you submit your comment.
Okay.
Now, I haven't put mine in. I've written some personal comments. I've got about 2.5, 3 pages of comments that are technical. They're very technical. They talk about different conditions for noise and why I believe the results that they got on the national neighborhood environmental survey are showing a higher annoyance to noise. They've got all that in them, but you don't need to get that complex. All you need to do is read through this stuff and make some of the comments that you're making tonight. So does that,
Councilman Clay,
Eleanor, does that do it for you? As far as
Unless,
how to comment?
unless some of the residents have questions for you.
Oh, yeah, no,
No,
I wasn't ready. I wasn't saying we're gonna quit. I just wanted
Uh,
to, does anybody have any questions on how to get to this Federal Register comment thing?
Councilman Clay, you've done an excellent job walking us to this. My question is there a limit on the number of characters that you can enter?
I don't think so. I haven't put mine in yet,
Uh-huh,
so I don't know for sure, but I don't
okay.
think so.
I was wondering if it was indicated. I can't see it at this point, but if it
No,
was,
well, let me look. The printing is pretty small, and I'm attach. You can even attach. You can
oh, good,
attach it.
excellent.
So you could write a Word document, for example.
Okay,
But there's a blue box. Can you see that right here?
I
Or
see that, yes.
There's attachment requirements. The 2 words down here, right at the bottom.
Got it.
Attachment requirements. Let's see what the attachment requirements are. You may attach up to 10 files. The maximum allowable size for any file is 10
Megabytes.
megabytes.
Yeah,
That's big.
yes, it is.
And that can be, there's a Word doc on there, a text doc, a PowerPoint doc. You got anything. You can put
Okay.
anything in there.
Great, thank you.
I'm just going to put in probably about 3 pages of text. Okay. All right. So any other questions on how to get your comments in? I'll go back to the presentation because I wanted to show you a couple other things.
I have a question, Councilman.
Yeah.
Can this survey and questionnaire be printed for those who are not able to go online and actually see and review this presentation?
I had that question a couple weeks ago from someone else, and I know of no way to do that. There may be a way, but I don't know how to do it, and I offered to help them to some degree, but I never got a response back. But I don't know how to do that. You can. I think there may be a way to mail them in, but to be honest with you, I just don't know the answer to that question.
Okay,
But
that's fair.
But I will say, if you go to that website and you find out that there is a way to mail them in and get a printed question, a printed sheet that allows you to fill in your name and address and all those things that they were asking for here, then let me know and I'll get back to them and say, hey, I found a way.
Okay.
Yes, Councilman Clay, I have a couple of questions. You made a couple statements, and I just wanted to know if those were your personal study, or was that FAA studies? One being, you said the way FAA measure noise is not valid. Is that from the FAA? Is that from you?
That's from me.
Okay.
That's from me. But if you read on that same page that I showed you, let me walk that back here. Get off of this page. See if I can walk back, and I'll show you. I'll show you something. Let me just show you this. FAA history of noise. They talk about how they got to the metric, but basically what the FAA is saying is that they don't know why this is, and they're coming to the public and asking the public, let us know. And you can see the research. There are places you can go to, a lot of links in here, research that I've been overseeing for the last 10 years, let's say. You can go and see what that research is, and you can make suggestions. One of the things they ask you to do is part of your comments can be suggestions for research that they might want to do and so forth. So they are, while they're not saying the curve isn't any good, they're saying they don't have a good explanation as to why the curve is a lot higher. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think so. And the other ones, I think I have the answer to that, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, because you made the statement. But I just wanted to know if it was from you or was it from FAA? Because how we have to address these issues, we want to know exactly where they're coming from. And you said that installation done in the 80s need to be redone. Now, that's from you as well, or from your study, or just.
Oh, no, my comments, if I don't have it in there already, I will probably add that. I was approaching it more from the metric standpoint because that's the tougher technical nut to crack. But if I haven't added that, I probably will add that to mine. They're still in draft form. I've got 2.5 pages. I might go to 3.5 pages.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have in terms of questions right now. Yeah.
Okay. Shall we go back to the presentation, Eleanor?
We said an hour, so
we're well over time.
Okay. I know people probably want to have dinner later, so how much longer, Councilman Clay?
Well, I could go through probably 3 or 4 more slides maybe, and that would give you an idea of, if you want to put a little more, what should I say, information in your comments. Let me just thumb through the slides and see. Let me switch back to my other presentation slide and see. And we'll see what you think. Okay. So we don't need that one. We know where we live, right? These, just for information, and again, this presentation is on my website. So these are the flight paths. You guys can see where you are. When planes depart to the west, they depart on 4 different paths. The northmost runway, and I'll show you with my cursor. You see this runway right here. Well, the northmost runway is for landing. This runway is landing. This runway is taking off. When they take off to the west, they come out here and they split. One of them goes on one side of Camp Creek. The other one goes on the other side of Camp Creek. We get noise in my ward from takeoffs, primarily from this runway right here. And that impacts the links. The links are up in there. They get that noise. Derek, your guys get it obviously right in here. This is flying right over the apartments. And then the third path that they take off is here, which flies directly west out over Ward 4. So you can see I don't know, the roads aren't showing in detail. You'd have to blow it up on Google. And then if they're not using all 3 runways, this path that comes out here splits. And this one goes down here, the blue one. If they are if they got so much traffic that they're taking off on 3 runways, which doesn't happen too much. They usually 3 runways more for landing. If they take off on the 5th runway down here, they follow this blue path. So if they have two runways taking off, it's this one, this red one going direct, and this first blue one that splits off. If they are taking off on 3 runways, it's this red one, this red one, this red one that goes direct across, and this bottom blue one down here. And just for your information, night flights, one of the things you could mention in your comment is that a lot of studies, these have been reported in the newspaper. Now, we've seen these studies, and of course, we've seen more detail that's in the newspaper. But studies reported in the newspaper say that being awakened at night by noise is causative for high blood pressure, possibly diabetes, a number of things that are
Wow.
physical ailments. And they're caused by being awakened at night, but you don't even have to wake up. And there are studies going on right now that I can't give you details on because they haven't been published, and I can't release that. But the studies basically are showing that you don't have to be wakened up till you're wide awake. If you just go to lighter sleep, it may have an impact that way. So let's go to one more slide. These are the paths when they land to the east. And when they land to the east, out here at 285 on this runway anyhow, this is the one I've looked at closely because it's closest to me. They're about 900 feet or so above the ground. When they fly over Main Street, which is right here, they're about 200 feet over the ground. Now, to be honest, I don't have off the top of my head what these altitudes are, but I'll tell you this, that for this runway, they come in at an angle of 3 degrees. If you know your trigonometry, and some of you are teachers out there, I know, so you may know you may be a math teacher. If you come in at a 3-degree angle, when they fly up here, when they fly over Main Street at a 3-degree angle, they're 200 feet over Main Street. So if you were the same distance out on this runway, you'd be also 200 feet. Or on this runway, same distance out as Main Street was above there, you'd be at 200 feet. That just gives you an idea that why at night, if a plane is coming in low, you don't hear the lower rumbling of the engine, but you are going to hear that whoosh as it goes over. This is a slide that I'm not going to go through, but it basically says due to the new navigation technology, the planes are guided by satellites. And if you think about it, if you were to put a GPS in your car, you guys have phones with GPSs in them. Some of you have built into your car. The GPS knows exactly where the car is, right? When you cross a certain street, you can see that you're crossing that street on the map. Well, that's the same thing with the GPS in the aircraft now. The aircraft knows exactly where it is. The flight management computer knows exactly where it is. If you program into the flight management computer, which is capable of flying the plane, you can tell it, follow this path on the map. And when it follows, since it knows exactly where it is, it will follow that path. What that happens with that is then that the path is very precise. It doesn't stray right or left of where it ought to be. It is within 1/10 of a mile. Actually, it's less than that. So it's less than a city block. That's why you get much more intense noise now, even within your ward there. You get more intense noise right under the flight path because all the planes are going right there. The other thing that happens, the airport doesn't have to rely on radar to know where the planes are because the planes broadcast their position. It's like you were in your car looking at the GPS and talking on your phone and telling someone, well, I'm at this location right now. And a second later, I'm at this location. And a second later, I'm at this location. So air traffic controllers, since they know more accurately where the plane is, they can pack planes closer together and still be safe. That's why you see so many planes close together flying over you when they have the push. So I'm not going to tell you about the noise measurements. I've already talked a lot about that. You might find this interesting. These are noise measurements that I took out by the convention center. And what you want to see is the level at the convention center was relatively quiet. It was 43 dB or less. That purple line across there, that is 1/4 of the loudness that you would hear just talking to somebody. So you can hear birds chirp, you can hear the noise from Camp Creek, but it was very much in the distance. But you notice every time a plane went over, that you get a peak. The sound level rises and it drops, rises and drops. And that noise floor is what is the problem, because you're hearing the excursions from that noise floor. Now, if you're right under the flight path, the average sound level will, for that whole period, would be considered, instead of 43 dB right here, it would be maybe 55 dB or 60 dB. But you can see it's peaking up around 80. 80 is about what happens when MD-80 flies right over your head at 1,000 feet. Thank God we got rid of those planes, or Delta did. But so this is, you don't care about East Flow. That's not our problem. It was Representative Schofield's problem, but not ours. That's a picture of all the flight paths at the airport, just for information. You don't really care about it. We've already talked about it. One other thing, though, that brings up, I believe, and this is something you may want to mention in your comments, I believe we're getting more low frequency noise from aircraft today. And that, when I get done with this, I'm going to ask you guys if you think the same thing too. In other words, what I'm saying is the older aircraft were louder by the scale that the FAA measures them. They measure them on what they call the dBA, or A-weighted dB scale. They were louder, but those sounds were more in the higher frequency range. And now with the big engines, they have much larger engines on the aircraft. The overall sound, by the way the FAA measures it, is quieter. But I think there's more in the low frequencies. And I believe that low frequencies are causing cracks in our house. I don't have any proof of that. Nobody will say that, but I believe that that's an issue. And here's a fact sheet that you might want to look at that repeats a lot of the things that I've said. Quiet neighborhood, conversation level, what happens when a plane flies over, what's the sound level, sealed house, all those things. If you want to go to one page that summarizes a lot of things that I said about noise, that's the one to go to. And then it talks about a new noise metric. You might want to read this and see what, again, it repeats a lot of things that I've said. And it talks about the types of noise. And these are the things that ought to be considered in a new metric. And then it ends up with my contact information. And for anybody in there that is a math expert and more interested, this is just a picture that shows if you were at the convention center and a plane were flying over you at 1,000 feet, which is the lower left-hand corner of the graph area. It doesn't go to 0, it goes to 1,000 on the vertical scale. So if a plane flies over you 1,000 feet, how high does it have to go to get 10 dB reduction, or half the sound level reduction from what you heard at 1,000 feet? And that would be about 3,300 feet. Now you ask the question, well, if I were to walk away from the convention center, how far would I have to go? How many feet would I have to go? I should be doing this with my cursor. And the answer is about 3,000 feet. In other words, if you get over to College Park Elementary School, the sound level from right at the convention center below that of a plane flying over 1,000 feet at the convention center would be about half as loud at College Park Elementary. And the next slide just shows more of those curves. There's the red one that we saw. There's one. Well, how high would the plane have to go to reduce it by another half? And it would have to go to 10,000 feet, because it's not linear. It goes by the square of the distance for the math majors. Okay, so that's a real quick tour through the rest of the presentation. Can I leave the presentation, or does anybody have any question that I need the slides for?
I have a
Councilman
question.
Clay, April Wyatt, I have a question. I just want to regress for a moment when you were talking about the night flights and being awakened by those. What would be a somewhat adequate phraseology relating to the blood pressure, diabetes issue in those awakening night hours?
What you can say is that you know that it's been published in the news that studies have shown that there are health effects from being awakened at night. Then you don't have to cite. They're not going to expect you to cite it. They know the citations.
Right.
And so you would like not to be awakened at night. And the problem you have is that we have cargo planes that fly in the middle of the night. Now, something I can tell you in that regard, and again, this is something that you could use possibly in your comments. It used to be we had a rush hour at night from about 9:15 to 10 o'clock or so. And I got an agreement with the FAA. I'm sorry, let me straighten my language out. The FAA says that nighttime runs from 10 at night until 7 a.m. That's the period that they penalize any flights that they believe would be flying out when they make the contours, the noise contours. They run a computer program, they feed in all the data on flights that they have, and planes that are after 10 o'clock at night, they penalize by adding 10 dB onto the sound level that they average in. And that's how they draw the contours of whether you're on the 65 dB or the 55 or so forth. So they consider night beginning at 10 o'clock. At Hartsfield, we have planes, used to have planes that would end up maybe about 10:45 or so. That would, if unless the weather was bad, and all bets are off if the weather's bad. But if the weather isn't bad, it usually was over around 10:45 or so. Well, what happened was that now we have a new rush hour. And even with COVID, that rush hour is, at least I was measuring it the other night, was around maybe even 11:30. And a lot of those planes are in fact, most of them are FedEx and UPS and
Mhm.
and a couple other cargo carriers. So the maybe one way to look at it is the FAA would, on the old metric, would penalize planes after 10 o'clock. The agreement that I made on behalf of the council, and we all agreed to it, but I'm kind of the point man, that I made with the TRACON was, if you let the planes fly the computer program courses out of the airport to 11 o'clock, that gets the planes out faster. And that means you have less noise later in the evening. If you say at 10 o'clock, no, you have to turn off the computer controlled flights. And when they do that, what they do is they say, okay, fly runway heading and then turn to a certain course. The agreement we struck was that after 11 o'clock at night, assuming there was no weather, they would not fly directly over Ward 4. They wouldn't take that runway heading straight out. I got them to agree that. And what they would do is they would, when they took off on that runway, instead of going straight west, they remember that second path that I showed you off there, the blue path,
Mhm.
where they made a left turn. Well, they would make that left turn and they make it even sharper, and they would fly out that path, which doesn't spare everybody. If you're down along Green Spring Road, you're still going to get noise down there, but it at least spares a large percentage of Ward 4. And that was the deal that I was able to strike with the TRACON, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, long time ago. So what has been happening now is that we're getting more air traffic later at night. A while back, and I won't go into the technical details, about a year or two ago, we were told that they were going to fly RNAV all night long, which means they use computer control all night long. So the issue that you run into is one of the RNAV paths is straight over Ward 4. It's that west flight that goes straight out over Ward 4. That is something that they seem to be experimenting with now. They seem to be trying to go back to the old way of doing things. But so one of the issues is that you would like them at night to fly, and I don't know that the FAA will understand this. That they'd have to know what we had agreed to with the TRACON, and it's not in writing. I mean, it is in emails, but it's not an official operational procedure as far as I know. But that's a fact that at night we've tried to divert the planes from flying directly over Ward 4. It doesn't save the guys in Derek's ward that are in the apartments along Camp Creek. The planes are going to go somewhere, and I'm not saying that we should pick on Ward 2, but people in apartments, if they don't like it, can move. Whereas people in homes, it's a lot harder to move to a different location. And for better or worse, that's the only logic I can give you justifying that. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. I know some people were in the chat saying they were leaving, signing off for dinner, and I didn't want to be rude. You were speaking, I was trying to pause, but we told them it would be like an hour. So I know people have some questions. So for those that need to sign off, I mean, please feel free to sign off, and don't feel like you're being rude. If there are people that have questions, Councilman Clay, I guess if you want to stay on here to answer additional questions for those individuals that may have questions. If not, my suggestion would be to send the questions to the email Concerned Citizens of College Park, and we'll try to get back with Councilman Clay to address whatever questions we have. But we have, what, 11 days, Councilman, to get this information into the it's made before the 15th.
Yeah, don't wait till the last minute though, because sometimes the web goes down and bad things happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
I personally think that everybody's got enough information at this point.
Right.
Even if they had to sign off 45 minutes ago, I think they should be making an argument that there ought to be research done on structural damage to homes from the low frequency noise. The new standard should be based on the C weighting scale rather than the A weighting scale. The C weighting scale doesn't discount the low frequency noise. The A weighting scale says people can't hear that low frequency noise anyhow, so we won't consider it an annoyance. But the problem is it shakes your house and it vibrates your teacup on the shelf, and it may be damaging your foundation.
No, yeah, yes.
And that's something that is an area for more research. That's a valid area that I don't think that has been researched all that much.
I totally agree.
Okay, so the takeaways that I noted for the people who I guess who are going to make comments, we talked about installation concerns, more noise. We're receiving more noise from the aircrafts. Technology has improved, so we want to focus on that and talk about better installation. We also made reference to being awakened at night could possibly increase your chances for high blood pressure and diabetes. And then we also mentioned that the low frequencies could possibly be the ones that are causing the structural damage. So those, I think, are some of the main things that we want to focus on when we're sending the information over to them. And I wanted us to try to close it out so people can go to dinner. But I mean, I truly appreciate it, and I think everybody on here truly appreciate it. I think we got up to like 38 people on the call.
Right.
So it was great information.
Yes.
Well, I just like to say that I appreciate you guys. This is the first group that I have talked to that I think is really participative, is really interested, and maybe that's because you've got a real problem.
We got more noise, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at the number of people that joined the call tonight. I'm glad that you all were on. I'm glad we were able to answer some of your questions. I hope you learned something, and you've got all the references you need. Just go to my aircraft noise page, and I used to have one. I took it off for a while. I've updated it, and I'm adding more things to it, and it'll help you with your response. But don't say it because I said it. Say it because you really believe it's true. I'm just giving you my observations and my theories, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to speak truth.
Right.
Totally.
Councilman Clay, we appreciate you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Night. Thank you.
Good
You're
night.
welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.